Oh man, we live. We are live. Time to start sharing and get the caring going. Man, this is probably super loud, but we'll see. Let's get those peoples in here, because without people, my stream is garbage. And maybe it's garbage even with people. Who knows? It might be just that bad. Oh, there's someone watching. There's someone watching. Is it too loud? Let me know if it's too loud. Yeah. While we wait for the troops to assemble. Should probably get some things together. I'll be back. Scoot. Oh, right. We are in here. And boy, is this probably loud. Just get this Artesian build stream is brought to you by Artesian water, Artesian bread, and all sorts of Artesian things. AK, not really. So, how are the woofers? Are the woofers good? We're going to chit chat about some things, but I'm not going to chit chat to myself. Although, judging by how this YouTube channel's been going, that's going to be the norm. Not bad. Trying some top shelf gin with some bubbly water and some fresh squeezed lime juice in there. Is good. It's Artesian. Oh, we got 2 peeps on the stream. I feel you like this. You like the thumbnail. I figured the more clickbaity the thumbnails, the better. And I was gearing towards a clickbaity thumbnail. That was for sure. So, I don't know how many people are actually watching, but feel free to comment below or to the side right now because it's live. I just wanted to let you guys know. Actually, you know what? I'm going to ping some people's in the server. The regulars. So we'll see if there's anybody coming in. And in about half an hour, we'll start actually doing the stream. But until then, I'm happy to answer all of the questions to anybody who is or isn't viewing about Artesian builds, Artesian bread, and Artesian spirits as well, which this stream is brought to you by an Artesian spirit. May the gin be with you. But today I'm going to be just sort of touching on a story that I think has already been way over covered already. And maybe you disagree, and that's fine. But this Artesian builds thing, it's kind of funny how it just sort of like, I don't know. It felt like, to me at least, that it just like exploded onto my YouTube. So like all the people that I'm watching, they're all talking about, all the tech people like Gamers Nexus and that they're all talking. I know, I'd never heard of them either until now. Like this Artesian, like literally, like if they kept the company afloat, they would be so popular. I bet you this Artesian guy would like get so many, this Noah, what's his name? Noah Katz. So for the people that are in the Noah, the cat's out of the bag. Apparently he's kind of a bit of a D-bag when it comes to how he runs the company. At least, we're just hearing from the disgruntled people, and who knows, maybe it's like 100% of the employees are disgruntled. So I don't know. To me, honestly, I don't really understand too much of the Artesian. Yeah, the ship totally sank, and he really could have like he could have righted it, if he would have just sort of taken the hit and been like, all right, that wasn't fair, and then I should give them the build, or even if he like stuck to his guns and said, you know what, I'm not going to give them the build. But it sounds like this didn't really sink the company. I think the company was already kind of sinking, and then like this happened, and it just all hit the fan at the same time. So Artesian builds. I don't know if anybody is not familiar. Maybe some of you are, some of you aren't. It's some specialty builder. I actually have not. Well, I tried clicking on their website. Yeah, I know they're not like building like super neat hardline custom water cooled builds, because those things are sort of like super, like those are tough to build, and I would think about possibly paying someone to do that. But like everything else is kind of like that's not that big of a deal. Like even like a soft line build, which I did recently for like the very first time ever, it's pretty idiot proof. And I'm a pretty big idiot, so it's anybody can do it. And this is sort of the thing that I want to get into in this stream, is just like building a PC. For I don't know why, but like for a lot of people it's very intimidating. I think there is a pretty big learning curve in that, and I think some of the people in the community are maybe a little bit snobbish, a little standoffish when it comes to like like I want to build a thing, and then they like spec out a build, and people like see the build. I see it on Reddit all the time, like the person like specs out a build, and they're like, you're an idiot for specking this and that, and I think that turns probably a lot of people off from building. I know for me it kind of was like a little bit discouraging when I first started out, because like there's a ton of stuff to sort of learn, but overall there's a ton of resources out there, and that may be intimidating, but it can also be comforting. And yeah, exactly, it's just like building Lego. And really I have actually a motherboard with me right now, and I'm just gonna sort of like pick it up and just like show like where stuff goes and like how easy it actually is. There's a few different things that you need to sort of consider, but a great starting point is pcpartpicker.com. And so like there's like a Canadian version of that, a US version. I think there's like Australia, UK, like all over the world. Like no matter where you're from, there's probably one for either your country or like a country nearby that you can use. So, and if you've got the cash to like pay someone to custom build you like these Artesian, like an Artesian build, I don't know, whenever I hear Artesian I just think of like bread. But it's really, that's like artisan bread, I guess. I don't know, but I think about bread when I hear Artesian builds. It's weird, but that's just what happens. I have a weird mind. But anyways, I just don't understand why somebody would pay extra when you can, like, if you do the research, you could figure out how to do it. Yeah, no worries, man. You're like the only one watching, but so maybe more people will watch eventually. Who knows? But so if you're going to build, I would say, or if you're going to get a PC, I don't know, definitely look into building your, like, at least look into it. I'm not saying you have to, it's maybe not for everyone. But definitely look into it. It's a lot easier. I was very surprised with how easy. Yeah. they'll charge like, yeah, $100 to build your PC for you. And it's like, you know what, that's not bad, especially too, like if okay, the hardware aspect of it to me is like super easy. Sometimes there are some software stuff that comes up and it's kind of really annoying, but you can usually just sort of start again. Also too, there's a lot of things that you know, if you talk to the right people, they can set you on a path for like doing something that's easy, you know, that's very, oh yeah, it is a ton of fun to do. It's actually too much fun to do because like you could get addicted to it quite easily, and it's not good for your bank account or your wallet, just because you're constantly building PCs. But you can build them for people in your family. You can build them for people, you know, your friends, you know, with their money. And you know, I would never actually like charge someone to build, just because it's like I get to build their PC for them. I would maybe charge them for troubleshooting later on if there's like, you know, they're like, my computer's not working, and then you like open it up, it's like a bajillion viruses on there, and they're like, yeah, I tried to download more RAM, and my computer hasn't been working properly. But I got a little thing here. Excuse the crinkles. So I got like a super basic motherboard right here. Like this is like legit one of like, I don't know, probably one of the lowest end motherboards you can get, and it's for an older generation, but it'll illustrate my point just fine. There's a few different things in your PC, and I'm just gonna sort of like touch on like very briefly. This isn't gonna be like an in-depth kind of thing because I am far too disorganized for that. And there's actually a ton of actually really good builds out there. You know, ones that don't involve Swiss Army knives or tweezers, or Livestrong bracelets. So basically, your PC is going to have a few different things. Your processor, which goes here. This doesn't have a processor in it. That's just a cover. Memory for loading programs and running them. A graphics card, which most likely will be going here, but some CPUs, they'll have integrated graphics, but if you're going to be gaming on it, you probably don't want to be doing that. But like there's plugs that, you know, you can't mess these plugs up. There are like specific plugs that, you know, you can only plug in one way. The most important thing is that if you ever were to build, is just pay attention. Just look at where things go. Look at like the shapes of connectors, and you can really, it's actually quite easy to figure out where stuff goes if you just take, yeah, I know it's a long, this is like this really long, narrow ATX board. But, you know, you can, if you take your time, it's not, you know, if you're trying to rush and force and push things in, you're gonna potentially break stuff. But, you know, if you pay attention while you're putting things in, if you pay attention while you're putting it together, and if you're in doubt, you could always like just go to YouTube and just be like, how do I put my CPU in the board? How do I insert my RAM? How hard do I have to push it in? Like one of the things that freaked me out was like putting the CPU in, and then like there's like this little clip here, right? And it hooks in and it holds your CPU in, and then you push it and it's spring loaded, right? And pushing it down, for me, it freaked me out the first time I did it because there's a lot of little pins in there for like Intel, any LGA socket, which is the pins are on the motherboard. You push it in and like I heard like a crunching sound, and the crunching sound is relatively normal, but it terrified me. I was like, I think I just broke my motherboard. But you know, it really isn't that bad. I haven't seen too many I haven't heard too many people like breaking stuff putting it together unless they like got frustrated and like, you know, started forcing things. That's usually what happens. Somebody gets frustrated, and you know, maybe if like you've broken up with people over building IKEA furniture, building a PC is maybe not for you. All right, maybe you should get a pre-built. If putting, like, to me, putting together IKEA furniture, I don't want to brag or anything, but they have some pretty good instructions and it goes together quite easily for me. I don't understand when people are like, IKEA furniture is, like relationship killing activity. I'm like, oh, okay. If, I don't get it. I think their instructions are very intuitive. So maybe then you're like, okay, I'm not going to build. I'll just get it pre-built. But I highly encourage anybody out there who's looking at getting a PC. Like, say, your kid comes home from school and, spring break, and they're like, oh, all my friends, they're playing Minecraft, and, I want to play Minecraft too. And, like, on the tablet that you're trying to like run it on, it's just running like garbage. Or, the little laptop that they're on that, you're using for their remote learning is like just poop in the bed when it's trying to run Minecraft or something. You're like, I want to build them a PC to run this, or I want to build them a PC for other games and stuff. And or hey, maybe it's something you want to do with your kids so you can spend time with them, and you can play games with them. That's sort of like one of the things I want to do with my kid is eventually I'm going to build them a PC, and I want to have like a family server where my wife, me, and my kid, we all play together. And like we'll have like a Minecraft world or something, and we'll like just build in there, and we can spend time together, hanging out and building things together. It's a lot cheaper than going and actually building something physically together, and it's a lot easier to fix mistakes too, and you don't have to worry about people getting hurt. And not to say not going out in the real world is not saying that it's not a good idea to go out in the real world. That's also ultimately the best. But you can't go to Mexico or Hawaii or the Caribbean or whatever once, twice a year. But you can spend $1,000, $1,500, and you can play with them and do all sorts of things throughout the year, and it ends up being maybe a bit cheaper. But yeah, but your kid comes home, they want to play Minecraft or something, and you're like, hey, all right, we'll get a PC. And there are some pre-builts out there that are great deals, and they're totally fine for your kid. Although there are some, I'm not 100% sure the brands. I know like Dell and HP, I think they'll have like proprietary components, which means they're difficult to upgrade. You can't like upgrade to a new motherboard in it. It just won't fit in the case because they use like some weird shaped one. Like there's in the PC sphere, there's like so many standardized parts now, and it's not like back in the olden days when it's like there was like 6 different types of memory slot configurations and different slot configurations for putting in I don't know, extra accessories, because I know even like graphics cards aren't even that like aren't that old overall. But yeah, if you're looking to build or get one, if you're looking to get a PC, definitely look into just building it yourself. And just like do yourself the favor of looking into it. Don't just automatically say I can't do it and hop on online and just get a pre-built. Obviously look into it. I'm saying look into it and see if you can if it's something you think is doable, because it really isn't. It's not rocket surgery. All right, it's it's great. And especially nowadays when GPUs are actually getting a lot more plentiful, it's actually interesting. Like, there's actually being price cuts now in Canada, at least, like big price cuts on AMD AIB cards. So aftermarket models of AMD cards, they're coming down in price. I think was it the like the 6900 XT Toxic from who was it? Whenever I hear the Toxic, I always think of the Britney Spears song. Again, I'm messed in the head. It's all right. Let me see. I'm just looking here at Canada Computers. Yeah, you search 6900 XT, and there are like there's some that are like really on sale. Like, where is it? The yeah, Sapphire made the Toxic. Like, so yeah, there's the 6900 XT. It's like some limited edition one, which is like it's a hybrid cooler. It was like like a week or so ago, it was like selling for like $2,200, which again is like ridiculously overpriced because AMD.com sells the 6900 XT for like $1,200 plus tax, but it like dropped by like $400, and they're sitting in stock after being dropped by $400 when, like, I don't know, a month or two ago, they were not like, they're like $2,200, and there was no way it would be sitting in stock. Like, they weren't on shelves. I was just actually in a Canada Computers today, and they had all sorts of AMD cards on the shelf. They had all sorts of NVIDIA cards. I even saw, like, in a bin, I don't know, it might have been for an order or a combo deal, but I saw in a bin there was like a 3080 in a bin on the floor, probably part of a package deal or something. But there's like a ton of 3070 Ti's, ton of 3080 Ti's on the shelf. So 100% do not pay scalper. And it's so funny because like scalpers were buying these like 6900 XTs for like $2,200 and expecting to sell them, and now they've like dropped by like $400 and they're sitting on their shelf. So definitely do not buy from a scalper, because they're plentiful. All right. And especially with new generation graphics cards coming, I always sort of revert back to graphics cards, even though I was started talking about like builds. It's like graphics cards, man, they get you. But also too, like, there's a newer models of graphics cards are coming. I know AMD has some that they're releasing, which are sort of like not even like refreshes. They're sort of like higher TDP with like maybe higher speed memory, like very slight iterations of like their current ones that they're going to be releasing. Not really sure the meaning behind that, but maybe they just want to have one last little boost before the next generation comes out, because later on this year, I think second half of this year, AMD and NVIDIA, they're both releasing new cards. So that also might be something to consider if you're thinking about building or buying right now, is that new cards are coming. And I know for a lot of people that can like put you in a loop where you are just straight up waiting forever, because you're like, oh, the next generation's coming. Oh yeah, I'll wait till the next generation. And then by that time, like, the competitor also has like a next generation coming. And then there's another next generation and another next generation, and you just never end up buying. So I highly recommend, again, like, just buy what you want at the time. Also too, if you're sort of get trapped in that a lot of the times, EVGA has a program called the Step Up program. So if you buy an EVGA card, and you want to even like upgrade it to another card, you can get put in a line to get a higher end card. And all they will charge you is the difference between the card that you bought and this either new model card or a higher model card, like higher tier. And it's a great program. I've actually never done it, but I have heard a lot of good good experiences with people who have done it. So like, say you buy a 3080 or some graphics card right now, and I think, what is it, 90 days out, you're eligible to get like a newer model in the step up program. So you buy a card and you have it for 90 days. Within that 90 days, if you want to enter the step up program with EVGA, you can, and you can be put in a line to get either a new card, like a newer model card, or a higher model card. So it's definitely something to look at, especially if you're one of those people that gets caught in that loop of always waiting for the next card. So it's something to consider, but yeah. But also too, like a lot of stuff is coming out now. Like there's DDR5, which is like the new memory that's coming out. And, just when DDR4 started being a nice price for decent performing stuff, now you have the DDR5. It's kind of annoying. And it's actually quite in its infancy. I personally would say don't get DDR5. But again, if you're getting a new build, I don't know, maybe. So do your own research and come to your own conclusion. It's like every other tech tuber out there, they're just like, here's what I found, but I'm not going to tell you not to get it, and I'm not going to tell you to get it. You need to come to your own conclusion from the information I've shown you. And usually it's not really conclusive information. So I will complain about that. But yeah. Now, a lot of these newer things coming out too, like there's a PCIe 5.0. There's new power supplies for that, and all sorts of like new things are coming this year. And it's like quite a bit more new things. And I would say the last time there was this much sort of new stuff was maybe around like, oh man, like Skylake, and actually maybe more towards like around like I would say maybe like Skylake, and then Ryzen. Those sort of releases is when there was like a lot of new stuff sort of coming out. There's a lot of DDR4 with Skylake, and then then you had like all these crazy things coming from AMD with like the new Ryzen, like getting an 8-core processor on a desktop, just like a normal PC level was like just so insane and unheard of. And nowadays it's like, it was funny because at the time everybody's like, oh, more cores, it's dumb. And now, like Intel has like, I don't know what the 12900K, which has what was it, 12900K. Let's make sure we don't put any fake news out there. It has 8 performance cores and 8 efficient cores, and you've got hyper threading on those 8 performance cores, so you got like 24 threads. It's insane how now that's like when Intel sort of like dug in and they were like 4 cores is good enough with I think the 7700K, and then they had the 8700K, 6 cores. That's the next level, and then the 9900K with 8 cores and 16 threads, and then AMD, who'd had 8 cores for like 2 generations, then was like, screw you, we're gonna go to like 12 cores and 16 on desktop, and Intel was kind of like, we're gonna do 10 cores and 20 threads, and now it's big cores and little cores and all sorts of cores and Apple cores and core samples, hard cores, and all the like. So you got to watch out. There's a lot of cores out there now, especially these Artesian cores now. It's crazy, man. But yeah, I highly recommend looking into building for yourself. And there's a lot of great resources. PC Part Picker is like a great one. It gives you a good guideline on what's compatible, what's not. And like, it's very difficult to plug like the wrong cable in to the wrong port. It's very difficult to plug the wrong power cable in. It's very difficult to, put your RAM in backwards or something. You know, like there are some tricky things, like, if you're only running, 2 sticks of RAM in a 4 slot, kind of like this guy here, if you're only running two sticks of RAM in here, you got to make sure you put them in the right slots, or else you could have some issues. There's some things like that. But again, you look into the manual for the motherboard, and it's all in there. You just have to have the patience to look. So that helps. Also, too, if you've got some, nerdy person in your family or whatever, they're usually a good resource. As long as they, you make sure they know that you're not expecting them to come by and do like tech support later on. They're probably going to be more than happy to help you out. And even so, some, like, I don't mind, like, stuff that I've built for my family. I have no problem providing tech support, if something's going wrong with them or with their PC. So it is like a ton of fun, to put it together, and then to just see it working, and to like know that you've done this yourself. It's kind of a nice accomplishment. Just like, I don't know, for me, it's just like, projects around the house, like if I'm doing like installing like a drain or something on a sink, being able to do that yourself is like a nice accomplishment. You can sort of pat yourself on the back and be like, hey, I'm adulting. I'm not useless. And then you start a streaming channel and there's only like one person watching. So who's the useless one now? Still me. But I'm just like, the funny thing with this Artesian thing, though, is like just how like everybody sort of hopped on it. And again, I was like, we're just finishing the Newegg stuff from Gamers Nexus, and then this thing pops up, and suddenly it's like, this like, next time on This Hour Has 60 Minutes, Steve goes in undercover as a worker at Artesian Builds. It's like he even cut his hair so he could go in undetected. He actually shaved for the first time in 35 years. So, and then was it Jay's 2 cents was like, they screwed her out of a build, or was it? I don't know if it was, maybe it was I forget if it was a girl or boy stream, but they were like, the streamer got screwed out of a build, and the dumbest thing was like, they really should have just ate the cost and kept on going. But who knows, maybe just because the company was like on the verge of bankruptcy, the guy was like freaking out, and he's like, we can't give it to them. This is going to be more money lost, and then we're going to be out of a job. So, but it is very disappointing when you see somebody mismanage a company like that, and it just sort of like goes downhill. And it's like, I don't know. I find it very frustrating to see that sort of thing happening, and then the person just like not straight up taking responsibility that they screwed it up. But oh my goodness, I just doubled my viewer count. I've got 2 viewers right now. This is awesome. Whoever you are, thank you. You just made my night. But I really wish people would talk a bit more in the comment section. Just, giving you guys a little bit of pressure. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. Classic parental guilt trip right there. But it's funny how, like, I don't know, just when I first thought about building a PC, how intimidating it was for me. And that's like why I'm always like, when somebody's like, I'm like, why don't you build one? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Your cat's breath smells like cat food? You know what? That's a very important point. And it's good. It's actually kind of nice if your cat's breath smells like cat food, because it's not the only thing they're putting their mouth on, Just saying. You know, and your cat's licking your hands, it's like that's usually like 4 minutes after they were licking their butt. So when you're like, oh, that's so cute, I'm getting kisses from the kitty. It's like, yeah, those are poop kisses. It was just licking its butthole just like 4 minutes ago, right over there. But thank you, though. I don't know who you are, Shano, but I appreciate the comment. It's a good Ralphie quote. I can appreciate a good Simpsons quote. But yeah, I would say anybody who thinks like, you know, I'm not technologically savvy, I can't build a PC, throw that out the window, because I was the same way when I built my first PC. And I made mistakes. I did break some things. But overall, it was really small things. And I can't say like it's totally foolproof, because like, all right, I built like 7-ish PCs, if you include like sort of taking out of a case and putting in a new case and all that. I built a few, you know, switching over power supplies, that sort of thing. But not too long ago, I made a really big, maybe not big, but it was a really dumb mistake. I used a power cable from a different brand power supply, and I fried one of my hard drives, and it was annoying because it was a good hard drive, and it was a dumb mistake. Probably the worst part of it was that it was a dumb mistake, and I was like, oh, I'm such an idiot. I should have known. But if you're building one PC and it's your first PC, you're not going to have that problem, because you're going to only have one power supply. So you're not going to have mix and match power supply cables. So it's relatively simple. And there are a ton of guides out there, tons of them. I think there was Gamers Nexus does a lot of good info on how to build. And there was another thing I wanted to talk about tonight. This sort of a I might save it for another stream. It's about mining, and you know, if you're got a new PC, or if you're looking to build a PC, how you can potentially offset it by doing a bit of mining with it. But I'll talk about that at another time. Unless there's somebody on the stream that's like, unless there's one of you two that's like, I really want to hear about that, then I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything you want to know. And maybe some things that you don't want to know. But it's another topic. I'll save it for next week. I'll save that one for next week, because it is kind of a longer topic on how to do it and stuff like that. And I'm not in this game to really like be like super educational, more like informative and help point you in the direction of the people that are educational. So, you know, or be a little bit educational, who knows? Those who can't do teach. So I should probably be teaching. But I did get something cool today. I got a mic arm. It's pretty neat. I can go all ASMR. I'll start whispering. And this is the ASMR portion of the show. I'm just gonna start whispering about technology. Maybe this is how I should do rumors on the stream. Psst. I heard that AMD, they have cores, more cores, lots of cores in their CPUs. I don't know. Is that really annoying? Because it's almost it's kind of annoying for me as well. But for that third viewer who came and suddenly put me one step closer to being relevant for Artesian builds, you know, I only need, 15,000 more viewers before I could qualify for a build from them. you know, all that interaction. But honestly, though, if you decide to build, there's, you could always comment below and I will get back to you with any burning questions. And, if you made it to like the 40-minute point in this video, congrats. I don't know why you're still here, but I'm thankful. It makes me feel cool. Not as cool as that Artesian builds guy, though. He's really cool. And you can tell he thinks he is, too. I can say all sorts of crap about him, but I'm not really. I don't know him very well. He's like my third cousin. No, he's not. But if you are going to build, definitely get a drill with thermal paste in the end. It's a key component for doing a good build. But no, to be honest, like there's actually like instructions with almost every single component that comes. Like, you've got the motherboard will probably have the most in-depth instructions, and probably, okay, as far as how tricky a build is, probably for me, the trickiest thing about building a PC, and maybe not tricky, but like the most annoying and difficult part is the little pins for the power button, reset button, and like hard drive light and all that. Those are like the most annoying part of building a PC and most difficult part for me. The rest of it's relatively easy. You've got there's like actual like physical parts in here. Like you can see like there's a little notch there, for positioning your GPU when you put it in. Even on your CPU slot or your CPU socket, there'll be a little mark that tells you, like there's a little triangle on this one. You can barely see it, but like there'll be a little mark that tells you where you need to align it, so you put it in right. Little cutaway in the RAM specifically, so that you put it in again correctly. And also too, if you get the wrong kind of RAM, it won't fit in. You'll notice it's either too short or too long, and that the notch doesn't line up no matter which way you put it. So you'll I just noticed on these RAM slots it says 1.2 volts. It's kind of interesting, because a lot of I wonder if that's like one of the limitations with this board. It is a rather low end board. It's a Z170. It's like one of the first boards for Skylake. As you can tell, it's got a DVI graphics output, which is a decent graphics output, not gonna lie, but it's old. At least it's not VGA, right? But and if you are going to build, another mistake I've made in the past is not checking where the standoffs are in the case. And for people who have never built before, you're probably, what are you talking about? You can see on the motherboard there's little holes for mounting it. For you put screws through there, and there's like these little standoffs, and what they are is exactly that. They stand off of the base of the case, and the reason they are there is because on the back of the board there's a lot of like pins and things that are sticking out, and these ones here are like especially dangerous. Let's see if I can get it to focus in there. Yeah, there we go. You see how those are sticking down there? Yeah, those little things. If these touch metal, you are in big trouble. You're gonna get some sparks, man, because that's where all the power for the CPU goes, and also a lot of, or actually no, not all the power. A lot of power for the CPU goes here. This is for the power for the rest of the stuff on the board. I think the power for the PCIe slots actually comes from here. So you're getting like probably around, I don't know, at least 75 watts of power going through there, plus extra for the rest of the stuff. But yeah, you don't want to be arcing that. And one of the big mistakes I made was when I was actually moving my wife's motherboard from a custom case that I'd made for it into like a more standard case. I didn't check where the standoffs were. And there was one that was poking into the back of the board. And it had some booting issues. And usually if there's some booting issues, there's either something not plugged in or there's something shorting out. So either way, if you know all your cables are plugged in and your PC's not booting, take it out of the case and try and boot it outside of the case on like a piece of cardboard or something that's an insulator, and you hopefully won't break something like I did, because it shorted. I don't know where exactly. There wasn't like a big burn mark or anything, but I think it like scratched through into like some of the traces in the motherboard, and it got it just wouldn't boot after a bit. So it was a hard lesson to learn, but it was a good excuse to upgrade and build another PC. So I was kind of sad and happy at the same time. But always check where the standoffs are, especially if it's like a weird board or a weird shaped board. Oh, this is a good question. When putting the motherboard in the case, do you screw it on directly or do you put rubber spacer between the case and the motherboard? I screw it in directly. I use that because the standoffs will keep the they'll keep the parts that shouldn't touch off, but these parts here, I think these also act as grounding points as far as the circuitry goes. So I've never put a rubber spacer there ever, or any sort of plastic or anything, because again, too, you're also the top of your screw is touching here on these holes, and that screw then is threading into your standoffs, and so you're going to have continuity through the top of your board as well going into that standoff. And usually what will happen is there is grounding in your power supply, to the outlet in the wall. And I think the outer case of your power supply is also part of that grounding circuit, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not an electrical engineer, but I believe that is a key part of grounding your whole system, is that when you screw your power supply into your case, you're sort of scratching through the paint on the case and into the power supply. I think that's why you have those heads on the power supply screws that have like the little serrations on the bottom to dig in. Let's see if I've got some hardware here. I always have some laying around. Yes, here we go. There's some beautiful. Oh, there, I've even got some standoffs here to show. But yeah, I wouldn't put a rubber spacer there, to be honest. But yeah, here you can look. I don't know if this will focus. Yeah, there. You see those little serrations on there? So those will dig in when this is a power supply screw for mounting your power supply, and those will dig into the paint on your case, and the intention is to make contact with the metal of your case, and then you will have your standoffs, which are here. I'm gonna see if I can get this in focus for you as well. There we go. All right. Yeah, you got. Come on. Screws are so tiny. All right. There we go. So we got a couple of standoffs here, and so these will screw in to your case. And again, they're bare metal, and the thread will cut into the thread in the standoff holes. So the threading of the standoff holes you'll cut through the paint in there, and when you attach the screw in the top of your motherboard, you will also get then continuity through there. But yeah, I've never done a rubber pad there. I don't think there's any benefit to that. Usually when you get like rubber spacers that you find like with a motherboard kit or a case, those rubber spacers are usually for your hard drives to isolate them from vibration, because the the spinning disk hard drives, when they vibrate, they can get kind of noisy. And then in a case with a large, pieces of sheet metal, that vibration then becomes amplified. Like basically like a diaphragm on your speaker vibrating. The vibrations from your hard drive will transmit through there. So those rubber spacers in your case kit or whatever, they're usually for your hard drives. They're not really intended to go between your motherboard and your case. Now, is it a problem if you put them there? I don't think so, because again, you do have the screw that attaches your motherboard is also making contact with the threads inside of the standoffs. So you are going to still get continuity through there. So like electricity can move between the standoffs and the screw that attaches the motherboard, whether you have a rubber spacer there or not. Again, I think what you're maybe thinking is that rubber spacer will help prevent any sort of like damage to the bottom of the board. But again, if you look at the bottom of the board, now this isn't like just one board. A lot of boards have different designs, so don't take this as like this is how every single board in the world is. But you can see there's like you can maybe see here. Let's see if this will come on. Focus. There we go. Okay. You can kind of see that there's like a dead space. Like you can see how there's like those circuits are sort of going around that hole. And then also here, there's a dead space there. You can see like those traces are going around that hole. They're intentionally skipping that hole. Even too with the and again here, like you can see like there's that dead space right here. Is especially you can see it quite pronounced how there's like nothing in that area. And then there's just like these little two metal points here. Those are all, again, you can dig in there and it won't do anything. So they're not, those rubber spacers probably won't do you any good. But again, I don't think they'll do any harm if you have them there. Because again, you're still getting continuity through the screws that you're putting in. But if it's made to have continuity, the more that you have and the easier the path for the electricity to travel, the less likely there's going to be any sort of problem. But that is a good question. And I do really actually appreciate that. That's like a really good like discussion question. And yeah, if you want to have, if you want to ask questions about stuff, that you've always kind of wondered, the great thing is like nobody knows who you are. So, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Nobody knows who I am either, but nobody knows who you are. So even if it's a dumb question, it's not like an embarrassing question to ask. So ask away. And, because I don't even know if these comments show up in the feed. Like when I still have to check out like these like videos when they post onto my YouTube channel. Speaking of which, for those of you, who haven't, like, subscribe, and share. I don't know who Cher is, but she's probably pretty nice. So like, subscribe, and share. And tell your friends, especially the ones who are thinking about like not building a PC, or just like simply stop being friends with them, because nobody wants to be friends with those people, right? Nah, I kid. But it is quite interesting, the electrical aspect of it. I know a little bit of the stuff, but not like, again, I'm not an expert with electrical stuff. I'm more of a mechanical kind of person. But yes. Any other questions about builds, about hardware, about the universe, about existential crises? I don't know. What's plural for crisis? I would think we would know this. This would be like a common knowledge amongst us, after 2 years of various. I'm going to look it up right now. Plural crisis. Crisis. Thanks.
Crisis.
It's crises, apparently. Crises. So it's not crises, it's crises. And that's your educational tidbit for today, is crises. But yeah, it is very interesting when you're building. But it's I will say one thing. A lot of people that have helped build, or at least like witness sort of them having like an issue, a lot of people, they forget to plug this in. This is like the CPU power cable, and they forget to plug that in. I've seen it happen a surprising amount, and not like surprising as in like you're an idiot if you don't do it, but like it's the frequency of it is surprising. Uh, and to be honest, it is an easy one to miss, especially if you're like putting your, typically if you're gonna build, I highly recommend putting your components in before you put it into your case, because once you have it in your case, it is a lot more annoying. You do get a ton of flex with boards when you're putting your RAM in, because RAM a lot of times, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but you kind of have to ram it in. You have to push it in quite hard, and a lot of times your board you'll get flex in your board when you're pushing it in, and especially when you're balancing off of two standoffs right here and here. And so you're pushing a RAM in, and you'll see your board flex. It's a little bit scary on the first time, but after you've done it a few times, you're like, oh yeah, it's flexing again. I hope it doesn't break. But doing it outside, like on a tabletop or something, is a lot easier. I see a lot of people, especially like trying to put like the cooler on the CPU, or like don't put your motherboard in the case first. That is like the worst move for building. Do it all on a tabletop. Put your RAM in, and I highly recommend routing your cables for for your CPU power, and your 24 pin. These two guys, I highly recommend routing them through your case before you put the motherboard in as well, because a lot of times after you put your motherboard in, there's like a very tiny space here thanks to the standoffs, and there's like a hole usually in your case, depending obviously on what case you get. But it is a pain in the butt to bring that out and plug it in if you haven't brought it through already. And I highly recommend just like bringing it through as long as possible, and then once you have your board in, plugging it in, and then accessing from the back and pulling the excess cord back in, and that just makes it a lot easier when you're putting it together. Also too, if you're going to put like a big huge air cooler on, put your RAM in first, because you will be killing yourself, especially if you don't like most aftermarket CPU coolers. They come with paste pre-applied, and a lot of times when you're building, especially for the first time, if you're like me, you don't get thermal paste, and if you screw it up, you're like, shoot. So thermal paste is a good $8 investment. I highly recommend, if you're a beginner, Noctua NTH1, I think. Let's see, Noctua NTH1, I believe it is. Yeah, NTH1 it's an excellent thermal paste. Highly recommend it. Pretty good performance, but it's like super easy to use, like very easy to spread. It doesn't get very hard, and it stays nice and liquidy, but it doesn't get too stringy like some thermal paste. I don't know if you ever watch like a YouTube video of somebody putting thermal paste on. A lot of times they're putting like this guy. This is like a really good thermal paste, but it is super. Oh, it is a real pain in the butt unless you warm it up first. If you warm it up first, it's nice. But if it's cold, it is a pain in the butt, especially if you're trying to spread it. But usually, like if you're building, again, if you're a first time builder, I wouldn't go like try and go super high performance, some crazy like overclockable CPU. Just get like a basic CPU, one that's nice for your budget. Most people, like, I used to overclock all the time. The last few builds, I just really haven't done any overclocking, just because like boost clocks are so much better managed now. You're not really gonna get too much benefit. Also, too, a lot of CPUs are like already maxed out from the factory these days. The ability for them to test them and to verify frequencies is a lot more streamlined now. So you're going to get better, what they call better binned, like they're pre-binned from the factory. And by that is like, their maximum frequency for, what you would be able to unlock with overclocking, boosting the performance and frequency. It's already kind of done from the factory. So there's no real point, unless you're like really hardcore into like, unless you're like a hardcore 3D Mark gamer. So I wouldn't say, get anything that has overclocking, or not necessarily don't get something that has overclocking, but I wouldn't build with the intent to overclock, because most often these CPUs these days, they boost from the factory really nicely and quite easily. I think that's a big reason why you see there's some companies that would sort of test CPUs to see like how high they can overclock, and sort of basically filter out the CPUs that don't overclock well, and replace them with, not replace them, but like sell the ones that overclock well at like a premium and make money on that. Those companies are like, I think the biggest one was Silicon Lottery, and they're kind of out of business. They shut down. And I think a big part of that is the fact that CPUs and that come pre-binned from the factory. And so you're not really going to get too much more out of them by overclocking. It's kind of like one of those things I think that are dying, like SLI, multiple GPU kind of stuff, like Crossfire. Those are all sort of dying. So those are dying for different reasons, though. But yeah. So most CPU coolers are quite easy to install, but not really that easy to install if you've already put your board in the PC. So like whether you have a water cooler or air cooler that you're putting on your CPU, I highly recommend installing it outside of the case. It makes it a million times easier. And obviously put your RAM in first. RAM, CPU, put those guys in first, route your cables. And then when you put your motherboard in, I think a lot of motherboards these days come with the, there's like an IO shield. Let me see if this one has one in the case for me to show you. If it doesn't, probably not. Whatever. But the IO shield is another one that's kind of tricky to put on it. But you can do that. It's a lot of them come with it pre-installed now, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. But yeah, you put the CPU in, RAM in, run your cables, put your CPU cooler on. I would definitely recommend not putting in your GPU before your board is in the case. That is one thing that you don't want to put that on the board before you put it in. So you put that stuff in, and generally there's a lot of standardized stuff, like in regards to like the dimensions of things. Like, you can put like a huge CPU cooler on here, and the only thing you're really going to have to worry about is like clearing some of the RAM. You're not going to have to worry about your CPU cooler interfering with where you're going to put your graphics card. You're not going to have to worry about your CPU cooler sort of extending over the edge of the board, unless you have obviously a liquid cooler, which you can run the tubes in whatever direction you want. But sites like PC Part Picker, they'll help you as far as like what coolers can fit into what cases and all that. And obviously read reviews on the parts that you're buying, because there's a lot of people just like you who are buying these parts and putting them together. There's a lot of people who are building for the first time who are leaving, reviews with good tips, good tricks, and legitimate grievances about these parts. So you can hear and assess from them, on whatever specific parts you're getting to put in. So there's a lot of resources again, but you put your CPU, your CPU, your RAM, your cooler. Obviously, I would say definitely plug your the fan for your cooler, unless you're doing a liquid cooler. But if you have a air cooler, plug your fan in. There will be a little one here. On this one, it's labeled here. You can see it says CPU fan. Some boards actually will not boot unless there's a CPU fan in there. I know. I remember distinctly somebody who was having an issue. Their build wasn't booting, and they didn't know why, and they didn't have their CPU fan plugged in, because I think some of them have it as like a safeguard, like a fail-safe, that when you plug it in, if there isn't a CPU cooler fan plugged in there, it won't boot, just to prevent you from overheating your CPU, which would happen if you didn't have your fan running. So there's steps even in these, like, to idiot proof it for people like me. So and maybe people like you if you're an idiot too. But I always assume that people know more or can understand things better than me. So yeah, you can install that, and then just like think a bit about too, like what you want your build to be like. And I don't know, don't be so, like, I know some people, they're like super obsessed with like getting it perfect the first time. And it's like, don't be obsessed with like getting it perfect the first time. Be obsessed with like getting it working the first time and getting something that works for you. Like, you're not gonna, don't be like obsessed with like having like one of those ones that's like, look at this show computer, and it's like, yeah, you can, but like, I don't know. To me, I'd rather take like the extra money that I would pay someone to make it look like a show computer and like put that into like the graphics card, because then because like when you're playing on your computer, you shouldn't be looking into the case. You should be looking at your screen, and what's on the screen is the thing that you should be enjoying the most. And if you're looking into your PC case and that's what you're enjoying the most, I don't know what's wrong with you. Either you have a really bad build, or you just have really weirdly placed priorities. No judgment though, no judgment. I just don't understand you, and I'm very disappointed in you. But yeah, a tip that probably nobody would tell you is that have thermal paste handy, just in case, because if you mess up your installation of your uh, of your CPU cooler, then you're going to need to have that thermal paste, and you don't want to have to like head out to the store midway through your build. That's like the last thing I would say you want to do. So definitely make sure that you have that handy, just in case. It's like an $8 thing, right? And especially with gas prices now, it's like that's less than the trip to the PC store, or less than the time you're gonna wait for if you need it running the next day. And usually it's like you're gonna build it, you're like, all right, I want to build it. But I would say too, if you're doing a build and you want to game on that build before you like stop your time on it, I would say allot yourself at least I would say maybe like an hour at least, maybe more, depending on how confident you are in your building, your buildability. But like I'd say even just like getting your Windows and that updated after installing it. If there's a good trick, because I don't often, that's like the longest process for me is like updating Windows and getting Windows updated to the point where I can install the proper graphics driver, like for like NVIDIA. I know like NVIDIA drivers, if you don't have uh, a recent enough version of Windows, it won't install your NVIDIA driver. Um, and that might be just me doing something dumb and making that mistake, or it might be maybe that's just the way it is, and that's a good tidbit of advice to allot some time, you know. But once you have it installed, once you have it put together, like putting it together isn't really too much time, especially if it's like your first. Maybe not, especially if it's your first, but like I would say, yeah, putting it together isn't going to take you too much time. Like maybe like I don't know. For me, if I'm doing like a speed run, knowing how to do it and all that, it's probably not going to take more than I don't know half an hour. But like maybe if it's your first time, it's going to be 45 minutes an hour, and then installing Windows is going to be like another, 15 minutes plus, updates. If you're going to be gaming on it, Steam and whatnot, putting that stuff in is going to take a good amount of time. Also, too, depending on your internet connection, right? If you have like super slow internet, I would say allot yourself at like 24 hours for Windows updates or something like that, because they can be big and they can be long. And like I've got gigabit internet, and like I'm already like just like pissed with how long it takes for Windows to like update in until I can like install drivers. And so that's also partially because of I think Microsoft servers, but uh, yeah. So I don't know. Putting a computer together is not it's not bad, and I'm going to reiterate that again and again and again throughout this. And you can do it. It's not hard. Like when I was like first building, I was like, somebody's like, "What do you think of the Skylake processors?" I'm like, "What's a Skylake?" And that was the Intel processors at the time, and I was like, "I don't know. I'm just trying to put something together so I can, do CAD work on it, and so I did, and I started gaming on it too, and it was, progression. Being an idiot, I bought like what was it the I bought a GTX 960 with 4 gigs of RAM, and and it was like the most pointless thing because like the memory bandwidth of it was so limited that it could barely use the 2 gigs on the standard model. So like the 4 gigs was just like a marketing ploy, which I like full on fell for. So it wasn't like the best card, but I did give that card away to a friend, and it's serving him quite well. Pairs well with he has kind of a really old CPU, so it pairs well with that CPU. Um, and they're good for each other, those two. But yeah, they're I would say there's a lot of stuff out there for you if you're looking to build, and I highly recommend just look into it. Just watch a few videos, uh, and especially if you've had the time to like sit through this stream and get to like this point, like with this amount of research, with the amount of research you could have done instead of watching my stream, you could have built you could already be like confident and on your way to like ordering parts for your PC. But yeah, there's a lot of people that you can bounce ideas off of in a lot of forums. Just make sure you don't get too dragged down with like the haters who think they know everything. Power supplies, that's a crazy thing. Intel versus uh, AMD, that's another big thing for processors. Uh, um, there's also like a lot between NVIDIA and AMD for GPUs. Although right now, not too many people are arguing because it's more of a get what you can buy. Um, but the bottom line is don't buy from scalpers. All right. And I think that's the greatest advice I can give, especially now, because legit supply for this sort of stuff is going to start coming out better, and you're going to, just like people who bought those like 6900 XTs for 2200 a week or so ago and now they're like 1800, you're going to be regretting it like crazy. So don't buy from scalpers, buy from a store or from somebody who's selling for retail or less. And you can do this. Try it. I guarantee you can do this if you take your time and if you do a little bit of research, um, and don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that's the big reason why a lot of people fail is they don't ask questions, and they're too embarrassed to ask questions, or they don't even just be like, ask like, what are the mistakes you made when you first started building PCs, and you'll get a wealth of knowledge of what not to do. And a lot of times those are the key. That's a good question to ask. When you're asking somebody about it, like, what is the big mistakes that you made? And for me, my big mistakes, I would say, was number one, not having thermal paste. Number two, not researching power supplies, because I got a pretty crappy power supply. And number three, buying the 4 gigabyte 960 instead of the 2 gigabyte one, even though it sounded really cool and like it was a good one, it was not really helpful for me at all for what I was doing. So those are my mistakes. I fell for some marketing stuff with the graphics card. I didn't do my research on what a good power supply was, and I didn't have thermal paste, so I did have an issue where I was sort of running the CPU quite hot after trying to just put the heat sink back on after I kind of messed it up the first time. So I highly recommend those three things from my mistakes and my experience. Also, too, making sure the standoffs are making sure the standoffs are installed correctly, not incorrectly. Man, don't want to mess someone up with that. And also build it outside of the case. So put your CPU in, your RAM, your CPU cooler, and get your cables routed and ready to plug into the board when it's put in. Also the IO shield, if it's not already attached to the board. But I think these days the IO shield, which is a piece of metal that goes on this here. This is the IO. So there will be a piece of metal that you get with the board that kind of clips over that or clips into a little space on the motherboard, or not on the motherboard, in the case, for that to sort of insert into. And so just being careful too when you're putting it in the case, not to scrape against the standoffs. That's also a key thing, which can be tough if you have the IO shield in, and because some of these things do stick out. Like you can see these sound connectors, they kind of stick out. Also the good old DVI, that guy sticks out. So I'm trying to insert it in, strategically, and dropping it in nicely. That's another key consideration. But I would say that's my TLDR. So like if you wanted to, sorry to give you the juicy tidbit and the summarized thing at the very end, but yeah, I don't know if you have any other questions, or if this was helpful. If you want to like it, you can. If you don't, I won't be upset. If you made it this far, it's like that's almost better than liking it. And if you want to see more, subscribe. I think next week I'm going to talk about mining with your GPU. Like, say you bought a GPU and you're like thinking like, I want to mine with it, or if you're thinking like, hey, I want to get into crypto. Did I miss the boat on it? And should I get into it or not? There's a relatively low risk way to get into the crypto market without risking too much as far as like your cost, by just sort of using the hardware that you bought for gaming to mine crypto. And then, if you want to like mess around with trading it or doing something like that, you can always, I'm going to sort of talk more about that next week, and what you can do with that. And some stuff that works well, at least has worked well with me, and could maybe work well with you. But yeah, I will save that for next week, and I'm gonna wrap it up. It was fun, a little bit empty this time around, but you know what? Thankful for you two people who are watching me live. Appreciate it, and appreciate the question, Shano Zero. Appreciate the question about the motherboard installation. And Virgo, thank you for being there and kicking it with me the whole time, man. Appreciate it. And whoever else might be watching, I really appreciate it too. Have fun. And go out there and build a PC, man. You guys can do it. You girls can do it. You know, I say guys, but like I mean that like in sort of a very general sense. You know, you guys, group of people, whoever you may be. But yeah, you can do it, and I believe in you. So have a good night, guys, and take care.